She was just the black florist carefully arranging bouquets, staying out of the spotlight. But when the bride screamed, "You're ruining my wedding photos," everyone turned to stare. What? No one knew. That, just the florist, was the groom's sister, and a millionaire business owner. And before the night was over, the bride would be publicly humiliated, with jaws dropping everywhere. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story is already hitting home, make sure you hit that like button, because this wedding just turned into a war. The air at the vineyard was thick with the scent of money and blooming roses. Sunlight, golden and warm, poured over the rolling hills, making the rows of grapevines look like they were stitched with gold thread. This was the kind of place where dreams were supposed to come true, where every detail was curated for perfection. In the center of it all, a grand floral arch stood, a half-finished masterpiece of white roses, eucalyptus, and delicate baby's breath. Tasha Rowland was on her knees, her functional work pants smudged with a bit of dirt, her focus entirely on a single, rebellious rose that refused to sit correctly. Her hands, strong and sure, moved with a practiced grace, coaxing the stem into place. She was in her element, a creator in the midst of her creation, happily invisible. She preferred it that way. The low hum of conversations from the wedding party, gathered on the manicured lawn for the rehearsal, was just background noise. She heard the clicks of a photographer's camera, a sound as familiar to her as her own breathing. She adjusted one final stem, smiled with satisfaction, and began to rise. That's when the bubble of peace burst. "Hey, you, what do you think you're doing?" The voice was sharp, high-pitched, and laced with an ugly sort of panic. It sliced through the calm afternoon air like a shard of glass. Every head turned. The polite chatter stopped instantly. Tasha froze, halfway to her feet, and looked up. Brittany Hanover, the bride-to-be, was marching toward her across the perfect lawn, her pristine white rehearsal dress fluttering around her knees. Her face, framed by expensively highlighted blonde hair, was twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Are you serious right now?" Brittany shrieked, pointing a finger with a perfectly manicured nail right at Tasha. "You're in the shot. You're ruining my wedding photos." Tasha blinked. She looked from Brittany's furious face to the photographer, who had lowered his camera and was now looking deeply uncomfortable. She then glanced at the small crowd of guests, their eyes wide, their mouths slightly agape. They were all staring at her. The help, the florist in the dirt-smudged pants. A chilling stillness fell over the air. Tasha felt the heat of dozens of eyes on her, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. For a moment no one moved. Brittany, however, was not one for silence. She took another aggressive step forward. "We are trying to capture a memory here. This is my day. I paid for perfection, not for the help to be crawling around in the background of every single picture." Her voice dripped with disdain. She scanned Tasha from head to toe, her lip curling. The message was clear: you are not one of us. You are less. Tasha's heart gave a single hard thump against her ribs, a drumbeat of surprise and anger. But years of building a business from the ground up, of dealing with demanding clients and high-pressure situations, had taught her the value of composure. Outwardly, she remained a statue of calm. She slowly straightened up, wiping her hands on her pants. "I do apologize," she said, her voice even and low, a stark contrast to Brittany's, screeching. "I was just making a final adjustment to the arch." She offered a small, professional nod. "I'll get out of your way." She turned to step aside, to retreat back into the invisibility she had chosen for herself. But Brittany wasn't finished. As Tasha moved away, Brittany rolled her eyes dramatically, making sure everyone could see her performance. She let out an exasperated sigh and muttered, just loud enough for the silent watching crowd to hear, "God, why do they always have to be in the middle of everything?" The words hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't just about being in a photo anymore. It was about her presence, her existence. The word "they" was a hammer blow, heavy with unspoken prejudice. Tasha felt it land. She saw the flicker of shock and discomfort on the faces of some of the guests. She saw her younger brother Logan, the groom, starting to walk over from the other side of the lawn, a confused frown on his face. Most importantly, she saw that no one said a word. Not one person stepped in to challenge Brittany's comment. They just watched, paralyzed by politeness or indifference. The silence was its own kind of violence. Tasha's internal calm hardened into something else, something cold and resolute. She had wanted to stay quiet for her brother's sake, but in that moment, as she stood there, judged and dismissed, she knew that silence was no longer an option. The tension at the vineyard was no longer just about wedding jitters. It had become something much, much darker. Brittany, having performed her little scene, turned her back on Tasha, as if she had ceased to exist. She flounced over to the wedding planner, a harried-looking woman named Cynthia, who was clutching a clipboard to her chest like a shield. Brittany's mother, a woman who looked like an older, more severe version of her daughter, scurried to her side, ready to provide backup. "This is unacceptable, Cynthia," Brittany declared, her voice still carrying across the lawn. "The black florist keeps getting in the way. I told you I wanted seamless. I wanted professionalism. This is the opposite of that." Mrs. Hanover chimed in, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper that was just as venomous. "Honestly, dear, you'd think they'd have better training. You need to handle this. She's not even supposed to be here during the rehearsal. That wasn't the schedule." It was a blatant lie. Tasha was exactly where she was supposed to be, meticulously checking the structural integrity and aesthetic perfection of an installation that cost more than most people's cars. She was there ensuring Brittany's perfect day would actually be perfect. The irony was suffocating. "I want her replaced," Brittany demanded, her voice rising again. "I'm not paying for vendors who disrupt my own wedding. Find another florist. I don't care what it takes." The planner's face went pale. "Brittany, the wedding is tomorrow. All the arrangements are done. Tasha's company is the best in the state. It's impossible to replace her now," Brittany scoffed. "Then make it possible. That's what I pay you for." Just then Logan finally reached the group, his easygoing smile gone, replaced by a look of deep concern. "What's going on?" I heard shouting. He put a hand on Brittany's arm, his eyes searching her face for an explanation. Brittany's demeanor shifted instantly. The raging tyrant vanished, replaced by a wounded victim. She leaned into him, her voice softening into a whiny pout. "Oh, babe, it's nothing. It's just, the vendors are being so unprofessional. It's stressing me out." She waved a dismissive hand in Tasha's general direction, careful not to look at her. She was erasing her from the narrative, recasting herself as the wronged party. Logan's gaze followed the gesture and found Tasha, who was now standing quietly by a supply truck, watching the entire exchange. Their eyes met for a brief second across the manicured grass. He saw the stillness in her posture, the unreadable expression on her face. He knew his sister, he knew that calm, it was the calm she got before a storm. His own expression hardened, a flicker of doubt, a shadow of suspicion, crossed his features. He knew Tasha's work ethic. He knew her professionalism. The story wasn't adding up. Brittany, sensing his hesitation, tightened her grip on his arm. She pulled his attention back to her, her eyes wide and pleading. "It's our big day, babe," she cooed, rubbing his arm soothingly. "Let's not let little things ruin it. Let's just focus on us." She kissed his cheek, a public display of affection designed to end the conversation, to smooth over the cracks she had just created. Logan allowed himself to be led away, but he cast one last look back at his sister. The seed of unease had been planted. He loved Brittany. He wanted this perfect wedding, this perfect life they had planned. But he also loved his sister. And for the first time he felt a sickening dread that those two loves could not exist in the same space. Tasha watched him go, her heart aching for him. He was caught in the middle, blinded by a love she was now certain was a carefully constructed illusion. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. The image of Tasha in dirt-smudged work pants was the only one Brittany had in her head. Just the florist, a nameless, faceless worker meant to be invisible. But that image was a carefully constructed lie, a shield Tasha had put up herself. To understand the truth, you had to go back to the pre-dawn hours of that very same day. The sky was still a deep, bruised purple when Tasha's unmarked truck had pulled up to the vineyard. There was no flashy logo, no branding. Just a simple, functional vehicle. She hopped out of the driver's seat, her movements crisp and energetic, even at this early hour. From the passenger side emerged Marcus Kane, his broad shoulders filling the frame of the door. He was her business partner, her best friend, and today her co-conspirator in anonymity, posing as a senior crew member. Inside the truck, and in the larger refrigerated lorry that followed, was not just a collection of flowers, it was a $60,000 dream. Thousands of stems of imported David Austin roses, cultivated in Ecuador, hundreds of feet of hand-woven eucalyptus garlands, rare, delicate orchids that had to be kept at a precise temperature until the very last moment. This wasn't just a floral arrangement, it was a feat of logistics, artistry and engineering, and Tasha was the architect of it all. She wasn't just the florist, she was Tasha Rowland, the founder and sole owner of Petal Row, one of the most exclusive and sought-after luxury floral design companies in the entire state. Her clients were billionaires, celebrities and political figures. Her work had been featured in magazines that Brittany probably had sitting on her coffee table. Tasha was a self-made millionaire, a powerhouse in a competitive industry, a CEO who still loved the feeling of soil on her hands. As her real crew, a team of a dozen expert designers and technicians, began the painstaking process of unloading. Tasha and Marcus walked the grounds. She held a tablet displaying complex diagrams and timelines. "The arch needs to be reinforced here," she said, pointing to the spot where she would later be accosted. "The wind picks up in the afternoon, and I want zero risk of it swaying." "Zero," Marcus nodded, making a note. "The reception centerpieces, the orchids will be placed last, 30 minutes before guests arrive, not a minute sooner." Her commands were quiet but absolute. Her team, who revered her, followed them without question. They knew she saw every detail, anticipated every problem. This was why Petal Row was the best. It wasn't just about pretty flowers. It was about flawless execution. So why the charade? Why was the CEO on her knees in the dirt, pretending to be a simple worker? The answer was simple, and it ached in her heart. Logan, her little brother. When Logan had announced his engagement to Brittany, Tasha had been thrilled for him. But then she met Brittany. She had seen the flashes of pettiness, the obsession with appearances, the subtle, condescending remarks. When the wedding planning began, Brittany had made a huge fuss about the vendors. "I don't want any family friends or anything messy like that," she had declared at a family dinner. "It gets too complicated. I want neutral, professional vendors who will just do their job. No drama." Tasha had seen Logan look at her, a silent apology in his eyes. He knew his sister owned the best floral company around. He knew it would be the logical choice. But he was trying to keep the peace, to please his new fiancée. Out of a deep, abiding love for her brother, Tasha had agreed. She didn't want to be the source of conflict. She didn't want to give Brittany any reason to cause a rift between the siblings. So she devised a plan with Marcus. Petal Row would get the contract, but it would be handled through a subsidiary name, one Brittany wouldn't recognize. Tasha herself would be on site, listed as a lead florist, ensuring every detail was perfect for Logan's big day. She would stay in the background, a secret gift to her brother. He would have the best flowers money could buy, and Brittany would have her neutral vendor. It was supposed to be a win-win, but now kneeling in the dirt had taken on a new meaning. The silence she had chosen as an act of love was being weaponized against her. She regretted it deeply. She had underestimated the cruelty of the woman her brother was about to marry. She had tried to avoid drama, but the drama had found her anyway, and it was far uglier than she could have imagined. Back in the present, the sting of Brittany's words was still fresh. Tasha pushed open the door to a small, quiet back room used for storing catering supplies. It smelled of cardboard and disinfectant. Marcus followed her in, his face a thundercloud of repressed anger. He shut the door firmly behind them, the click of the latch echoing in the small space. "That's it," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You want me to go out there? You want me to say something? Because I will. Right now, I'll walk right up to that bridezilla and her mother and tell them exactly who they just insulted." He started to turn, ready to march back out into the fray. Tasha put a hand on his arm, her touch surprisingly strong. "No," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it held a core of steel that stopped him in his tracks. He turned back to her, His brow furrowed in disbelief. Tasha, did you hear what she said? They. She didn't even see you as a person. She saw a category. And your brother, he just stood there and let it happen. The frustration and hurt on her behalf poured out of him. He was more than her business partner. He was family, and he couldn't stand to see her disrespected like this. I heard every word, Tasha said, her gaze steady and unwavering. And Logan, he's confused. He's caught in her web. Yelling won't fix that. It will just make us look emotional and unprofessional, which is exactly what she called us. She took a deep breath, her mind working, processing, strategizing. This was no longer just a personal insult. It was a business problem. It was a family crisis, and it required a precise solution. So what? Marcus demanded. We just let her get away with it? Let her treat you like dirt and walk down the aisle tomorrow to marry into your family? Tasha looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something other than calm in her eyes. It was a cold, calculated fire. No, she said. We don't let her get away with it. We let her do it to herself. Marcus looked confused. What does that mean? Tasha walked over to a stack of linen boxes and leaned against them. It means we let her keep talking, she explained, her voice dropping conspiratorially. We let her think she's won. We let her get comfortable in her own ugliness. Let her show everyone exactly who she really is, not just me. A slow understanding dawned on Marcus's face. This wasn't about retreat. It was about tactics. Tasha continued, laying out her strategy as if it were a floral design plan. She thinks I'm just some worker she can push around. She has no idea who I am. No idea that I'm the one signing the checks. No idea that I'm about to be her sister-in-law. She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. I came here today to stay in the shadows and make my brother's wedding beautiful. I was willing to swallow my pride for his happiness. But this isn't about pride anymore. Her gaze hardened. This is about his future. I will not stand by and let my brother marry someone this hateful, this deceitful, without him seeing the unvarnished truth. I'm not here to ruin the wedding anymore. A faint, mirthless smile touched her lips. I'm here to save my family. Marcus stared at her, his anger slowly morphing into awe. He saw the CEO now, the brilliant strategist who had built an empire from nothing. Brittany Hanover had just picked a fight with a woman she couldn't see, and she was about to lose in spectacular fashion. Tasha and Marcus went back to work, their movements efficient and professional, betraying none of the turmoil beneath the surface. They were overseeing the placement of smaller arrangements near the guest seating area, when a tentative voice broke the silence. Excuse me. Tasha turned to see a young woman in the simple black polo shirt and slacks of the event staff. She looked to be in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a nervous energy about her. She was clutching her phone in her hand, her knuckles white. I'm Ellie, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I'm a junior event assistant. I wanted to say I'm so sorry about what happened earlier. With the bride, Ellie's sincerity was a balm on the raw wound of the public humiliation. Tasha offered her a small, genuine smile. Thank you, Ellie. That's kind of you to say. Ellie shuffled her feet, clearly wanting to say more. It wasn't right, she burst out, her voice a fierce whisper. What she said, how she treated you, it was awful. And the way everyone just stood there. She shook her head, a look of disgust on her face. You handled that with so much grace. Honestly, you handled that way better than I would have. A wave of gratitude washed over Tasha. In a sea of silent complicity, this one young woman had chosen to speak up, to acknowledge the injustice. It was a small act, but it meant the world. It reminded Tasha that there was still good in people. I appreciate that more than you know, Tasha said, her voice warm. Ellie bit her lip, hesitating for a moment before making a decision. She held up her phone slightly. Look, this is probably crazy, and I could get fired for this. But I was recording some B-roll footage of the setup for the planner's portfolio. Just wide shots of the venue coming together. She took a deep breath. But my phone was still recording when Brittany came over to you. I caught the whole thing. Tasha's eyes widened slightly. She stared at Ellie, a dozen thoughts racing through her mind. Proof. Hard, undeniable proof. Ellie saw the look on her face and hurried to explain. I caught her yelling, The things she said about the help. And I caught the part where she muttered that awful comment about, you know. She looked down, embarrassed on Brittany's behalf. I can send it to you. If you want it. It just felt wrong to have it, and not offer it to you. This was it. This was the piece Tasha didn't know she needed. Her plan had been to let Brittany expose herself through her own actions, but that could be subjective. A video was not subjective. It was cold, hard fact. Tasha looked at Ellie, at this young woman who was risking her job to do the right thing. She saw a reflection of her own values, integrity, courage. Ellie, Tasha said, her voice filled with a new level of respect. I would be very grateful for that footage. She gave Ellie her personal cell number, and a moment later, her phone buzzed with an incoming video file. Tasha looked up from her screen and met the young assistant's worried gaze. A powerful, reassuring calm settled over her. The trap now had teeth. You didn't do something crazy, Ellie, Tasha said, her voice low and certain. You may have just saved this wedding. Ellie didn't know the half of it. She didn't know she had just handed a weapon to a general, but she did know she had done the right thing. And as she walked away a little bit taller than before, she felt she had just become part of something much bigger than setting up chairs. The rehearsal dinner was held in a rustic chic barn on the vineyard property. Twinkle lights were strung from the high rafters, casting a warm, romantic glow over the long wooden tables. The air was filled with laughter and the clinking of wine glasses. It was a perfect picture of pre-wedding bliss. But at the main table where Brittany sat surrounded by her bridesmaids and her mother, the conversation was anything but beautiful. From across the room, where she was seated at a small table reserved for senior vendors, Tasha watched them. She wasn't eavesdropping, but she didn't have to. Brittany was holding court, her voice a little too loud from the champagne, her gestures animated and dramatic. Her mother sat beside her, nodding and smiling, her expression a mirror of her daughter's smug cruelty. Can you believe the nerve of that florist today? Brittany said, leaning in conspiratorially, though her voice carried. Just crawling around in the dirt like she owned the place. She's probably just some cleaning lady who plays florist on the weekends to make extra cash. A few of the bridesmaids tittered nervously. They were caught between their loyalty to Brittany and the obvious unpleasantness of her words. Mrs. Hanover added fuel to the fire. Well, you handled her perfectly, darling. You have to be firm with people like that. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. They simply don't understand boundaries. The casual prejudice, the sweeping generalizations made Tasha's stomach clench. They weren't talking about a person. They were talking about a stereotype, a caricature they had created in their minds to make themselves feel superior. Brittany took a sip of her champagne, smug smirk on her face. I totally put that girl in her place, she bragged, her eyes scanning the room. Perhaps looking for Tasha. Logan was a little confused at first, but I explained how unprofessional she was being. He gets it now. He knows that on our wedding day, my happiness comes first. Tasha met her gaze from across the room for a fleeting moment. Brittany's eyes held a look of triumphant dismissal. She was confident she had won, that Tasha had been successfully relegated to the category of a minor annoyance, already forgotten. Tasha held her gaze, her expression placid, unreadable. She gave nothing away. She simply took a slow, deliberate sip of her water, taking a mental note of every word, every sneer, every fake smile. She was a silent witness, a human recorder capturing data. The more Brittany talked, the deeper the hole she dug for herself. Tasha was content to just let her keep digging. The truth, she knew, would sound so much more powerful when it was preceded by a mountain of documented lies. The morning of the wedding arrived, a flurry of controlled chaos. Hairstylists, makeup artists, and frantic wedding planners moved through the bridal suite like a well-oiled machine. At the center of it all was Brittany, transformed from a petty tyrant into an empress. The power, it seemed, had gone completely to her head. Tasha, true to her word, remained in the background, ensuring her team executed the final, breathtaking stages of the floral installation. The reception hall was a wonderland of white and green. Every surface dripped with roses and orchids. It was, by all accounts, a masterpiece. But Brittany was no longer capable of seeing beauty. She only saw opportunities to exert her dominance. She stormed out of the bridal suite and found the head caterer, a man with decades of experience, and began berating him because the shade of the napkins was, in her opinion, more of an eggshell than a true ivory. Marcus, who was pretending to adjust a centerpiece nearby, watched the exchange with growing disgust. The caterer, a consummate professional, tried to explain that these were the exact napkins she had approved months ago. Brittany waved him off. "I don't care what I approve. I'm the bride, and I'm telling you I don't like them. Fix it." Her voice was sharp and dismissive. Then she turned to the wedding planner, Cynthia, who looked as if she hadn't slept in a week. "This is your fault," Brittany snapped. "You are completely incompetent. All of this, it's just one thing after another." She gestured vaguely at the perfect room. "I should have known better. I should have just hired a white team. They would have understood the aesthetic I was going for." The words, spoken with such casual bigotry, landed like a punch in the gut. Cynthia flinched, as if she'd been struck. The caterer froze, his face a mask of disbelief. Marcus, however, did not freeze. His hand was already in his pocket, his thumb pressing the record button on his phone. He angled his body slightly, ensuring the phone's microphone was pointed directly at the escalating confrontation. He caught it all, the demanding tone, the insults, and the final damning sentence about hiring a white team. Brittany was spiraling, drunk on the authority she believed this day gave her. She was no longer just being cruel to Tasha. She was revealing a pattern of behavior, a deep-seated prejudice that she applied to anyone she deemed beneath her. She was no longer just a bridezilla. She was a liability, a walking, talking PR disaster waiting to happen. And Marcus now had the recording to prove it. He calmly stopped the recording, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and went back to adjusting the centerpiece, his expression one of cool professionalism. The trap was getting stronger, the evidence mounting. Brittany, completely oblivious, stormed back to her bridal suite, convinced she was a powerful queen ruling her kingdom. In reality, she was just a prisoner, and the walls were closing in. Later that afternoon, with the ceremony just a few hours away, Brittany sought out Logan. She found him in a quiet garden, trying to find a moment of peace amidst the swirling chaos. He looked tense, his brow furrowed with a worry that hadn't been there a day ago. Brittany, however, saw this not as a sign of his inner turmoil, but as an opportunity. She rushed to his side, her voice laced with manufactured concern. "Babe, thank God I found you. We need to talk." Logan looked at her, his eyes weary. "What is it, Britt? Is something wrong?" "It's the florist," she said, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "Tasha, I think she's trying to sabotage the wedding." Logan stiffened. "Sabotage? What are you talking about? The flowers look incredible." "That's what she wants you to think," Brittany insisted, her eyes wide with fake sincerity. "But it's the little things. I'm seeing them everywhere." She proceeded to weave a web of careful lies, built on half-truths. She showed him a photo on her phone of 2 roses in a bridesmaid's bouquet that were slightly different shades of white. "She's using inferior product," Brittany whispered. It was nonsense. They were 2 different varieties of rose, intentionally chosen for texture. Next, she mentioned a delivery of garlands that had been 30 minutes late that morning. "She's trying to throw off the whole schedule," she claimed, conveniently omitting the fact that the delivery was late because she had blocked the service entrance for an hour while her bridesmaids took selfies. It was a masterful performance of manipulation. She presented him with a series of minor, explainable issues and framed them as a malicious, coordinated attack. Logan listened quietly, his face unreadable. He looked at the photos. He heard her panicked explanations. A day ago, he would have defended her without question, reassured her, and promised to take care of it. But something had shifted in him. The image of his sister's calm, hurt face was burned into his memory. The things Brittany was saying didn't align with the woman he had known his entire life. Tasha was meticulous. She was a perfectionist. The idea of her intentionally sabotaging anything, let alone his wedding, was ludicrous. For the first time, Logan didn't jump to defend his fiancée. He didn't offer a solution. He just stood there, a profound and unsettling silence hanging between them. He simply looked at her, his gaze distant, as if he was seeing her for the very first time. I have to go check on my groomsmen," he said finally, his voice flat. He excused himself and walked away, leaving Brittany standing alone in the garden. She watched him go, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She mistook his silence for agreement. She mistook his retreat for capitulation. In her mind, she had won. She had successfully painted Tasha as the villain and cemented her own position as the victim. She had no idea that his silence was not acceptance. It was the beginning of a terrifying revelation. He was finally starting to see the truth. Tasha watched Logan walk away from Brittany. His shoulders slumped, his face a mask of conflict. Her heart ached for him, but her resolve hardened. It was time. The observation phase was over. The execution phase was about to begin. She stepped away from the reception hall, pulling her phone from her pocket and walking towards a quiet, secluded patio overlooking the vineyards. Her first call was to her lawyer. He answered on the first ring. "David, it's Tasha Rowland." Her voice was crisp, all business. "I need you to do something for me immediately. The Hanover wedding contract. I want a full release prepared on every document signed with our subsidiary company. And more importantly, I want the NDA lifted. Effective immediately." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Tasha, are you sure? The confidentiality clause is ironclad." "I'm sure," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Have the documents drawn up. I want them ready within the hour." She hung up before he could ask any more questions. Her second call was to a number she knew by heart. A man named Albert Sterling, a seasoned property mogul, answered. "Albert, it's Tasha." "Tasha. What a surprise. Enjoying the view?" he chuckled. "The view is about to get a lot more interesting," she replied. "Albert, I need a favor. I'm at the vineyard." "Your vineyard?" Albert chuckled again. "I know. My manager told me Petal Row was handling the flowers. Best in the dizzes." Tasha took a breath. "That's not why I'm calling. You and I both know that my holding company, RG Holdings, quietly owns 40% of this venue. We're silent partners." It was a secret she had kept for years. A strategic investment. Brittany thought she was a guest at an exclusive venue. She had no idea she was on property partially owned by the woman she was tormenting. "I need you to call your general manager," Tasha instructed. "Tell him that I have full operational authority on an internal matter today. Tell him that he and his head of security are to meet me in the main conference room at 7 p.m. sharp, and that they are to follow my instructions without question." There was another pause. This one longer. Albert was a shrewd businessman. He knew this was not a normal request. "Is everything all right, Tasha?" he asked, a note of concern in his voice. "Everything is about to be," she said. "The trap is set." She hung up the phone just as she heard footsteps behind her. It was Logan. His face was pale, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. "Tasha," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I saw you with Brittany. I've been thinking about what happened yesterday. It's not adding up." He ran a hand through his hair. "I need the truth, Tasha. All of it. Please." Tasha looked at her brother, at the man she was doing all of this for. She saw the pain and confusion in his eyes and her heart went out to him. But this was not the time or place for a full explanation. The reveal had to be perfect. It had to be undeniable. She gave him a simple, reassuring nod. Her voice was soft, but firm. "You'll see tonight, Logan. I promise." The welcome party was in full swing. Guests, dressed in cocktail attire, mingled in the grand hall, sipping champagne and enjoying exquisite hors d'oeuvre. The atmosphere was one of celebration and anticipation. Brittany was in her element, gliding through the crowd, accepting compliments on the stunning decor, a radiant smile plastered on her face. She felt victorious. She had handled the annoying florist, she had her fiancé back on her side, and her perfect wedding was just hours away. It was then that the wedding planner, Cynthia, approached her. She leaned in, her face professional but her eyes betraying a hint of nervousness. "Brittany, excuse me," she said quietly. "There's a small issue with the billing for the reception hall. The venue manager needs to speak with you urgently. He asked if you could come to the main conference room to sort it out." Brittany's smile tightened. "An issue?
On her wedding eve? The nerve. Can it wait?" she snapped. "I'm with my guests."
He said it was quite urgent, Cynthia replied, her voice steady. "Something about a discrepancy with the initial deposit." Brittany let out an exasperated sigh, rolling her eyes for the benefit of the bridesmaid she was talking to.
"Fine,"
she said, handing her champagne flute to her friend. "I'll go handle this."
"Honestly, the incompetent."
She stormed away from the party, her heels clicking angrily on the polished stone floor. She was picturing a confrontation with some bumbling manager, a chance to exert her authority once more. She shoved open the heavy wooden door of the conference room without knocking, a sharp rebuke already on her lips. But the words died in her throat. The scene before her was not what she expected. The room was dimly lit. Seated around the long, polished mahogany table were not just one manager, but two serious-looking venue executives in dark suits. And they were not alone. At the head of the table sat Logan, his face grim and unreadable. Next to him was Tasha, her expression perfectly, terrifyingly calm. Beside Tasha sat Marcus, his arms crossed over his chest, looking like a bodyguard. And at the far end of the table was the little event assistant, Ellie, looking nervous, but resolute. The air in the room was thick with a dreadful, silent tension. On the gleaming surface of the table in front of Tasha, there was a laptop, a stack of printed emails, and a collection of glossy photographs. Brittany froze in the doorway, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This wasn't about a billing issue. This was something else. This was an ambush. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, a cold dread washing over her. She had walked into a trap. "Brittany," Logan said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Close the door. Sit down." His tone was not a request. It was a command. Numbly she did as she was told, her legs feeling unsteady as she walked to the empty chair opposite them. The click of the door latch shutting sounded unnaturally loud in the silent room. She sat down, her eyes darting between the faces around the table. Tasha, Logan, Marcus, Ellie, the executives. It was a jury, and she was the one on trial. Her mind raced, trying to find a narrative, an explanation for this bizarre gathering. Had the florist complained? Was this about her yelling at the rehearsal? She opened her mouth to speak, to launch into a defense, to cast herself as the victim one more time. But Tasha held up a hand, silencing her before she could utter a single word. Tasha's gaze was direct and unflinching. She nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible gesture towards Ellie. "Play the footage," Tasha said, her voice cutting through the silence, like a surgeon's scalpel. Ellie, her hand trembling slightly, reached forward and pressed the spacebar on the laptop. The large screen on the wall, previously dark, flickered to life. The first thing Brittany saw was her own face, twisted in a sneer, captured in crystal clear high definition. The first thing she heard was her own voice, shrill and ugly, filling the conference room. "You're in the shot. You're ruining my wedding photos." The video played on, an unedited nightmare of her behavior at the rehearsal. The camera captured her condescending dismissal of Tasha, her demand that the help stay out of sight. Then came the most damning moment. The camera had zoomed in slightly, and her muttered words were perfectly audible, echoing in the tomb-like silence of the room. "God, why do they always have to be in the middle of everything?" A collective intake of breath could be heard from the venue executives. Brittany's face went completely white. The blood drained from her head, leaving her feeling dizzy and sick. She stared at the screen, at this monstrous version of herself, and for the first time, she had no defense. The proof was right there, undeniable and brutal. She looked at Logan. His face was a blank canvas of stone, his eyes fixed on the screen, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped in his cheek. He didn't look angry, he looked hollowed out. As the video of her meltdown ended, the screen went black for a second, before a new file began to play. This time, there was no video, only audio. It was Marcus's recording from that morning. Again, her voice filled the room, dripping with arrogance. "You are completely incompetent. I should have just hired a white team. They would have understood the aesthetic I was going for." The silence that followed this second recording was even more profound, more damning. It was the sound of a world crashing down. Brittany began to tremble, a wave of panic so intense it threatened to choke her. She looked wildly around the table, from Logan's stony face to Marcus's disgusted glare, to Ellie's quiet resolve. Finally her eyes landed on Tasha. Tasha, who had not moved, who had not flinched. Tasha, who was watching her with an unnerving, almost pitying calm. Brittany's carefully constructed world, her perfect image, her entire identity as the flawless bride, had been utterly demolished in the space of 2 minutes. She opened her mouth, a desperate croaking sound emerging. It's not, you're twisting my words." The lie was pathetic, even to her own ears. The evidence was absolute. She had been caught, utterly and completely. Her reign of terror was over. For the first time since Brittany had entered the room, Tasha spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it commanded the attention of everyone present. It was the voice of a CEO, a leader, a woman in total control. "There is no twist, Brittany," she said, her eyes locked on the crumbling bride. "There is only what you said, and what you did." Tasha leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped on the table. "You were right about one thing. The vendors shouldn't have any messy family connections. That's why I didn't tell you who I am. I wanted my brother to have a peaceful, drama-free wedding." She paused, letting the words sink in. "My name is Tasha Rowland. I am the owner and founder of Petal Row, the company you hired, the company you just insulted. I built it from nothing. Those inferior flowers you complained about were imported at my direction. The late delivery was caused by your photo shoot. The $60,000 floral installation you took for granted was my gift to my brother." Brittany stared at her, her mouth hanging open, comprehension and horror dawning on her face. Just the florist, the cleaning lady. The woman she had dismissed as nothing was the architect of the entire event. Logan finally turned his head, his empty gaze falling upon the woman he was supposed to marry. His voice was quiet, brittle with shattered love. "She's my sister, Brittany." He said the words as if they were a death sentence. "The family you were so eager to marry into, the family you just disrespected in the most vile way possible. This whole time, you've been lying to me, manipulating me, all while showing my sister my own blood. This unbelievable cruelty." Brittany began to sob, the tears she had used so often as a weapon now genuine tears of desperation. "Logan, please," she wailed. "I love you. I was just stressed. It's the wedding. I didn't mean any of it." "I don't believe you," Logan said, his voice flat and final. "I don't think I know who you are at all, and I can't marry someone I don't know. I certainly can't marry someone who treats people like this, who treats my family like this." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "The wedding is off." The words fell into the room like stones. Brittany let out a gut-wrenching sob, collapsing forward onto the table, her body shaking. Logan didn't look at her. He simply turned and walked towards the door. He paused with his hand on the handle and looked back at Tasha. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with pain and gratitude. And then he was gone. As if on cue, one of the venue executives, the general manager, cleared his throat. He looked at Brittany with cold, professional detachment. "Ms. Hanover," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Given the evidence of your behavior and the violation of our venue's code of conduct, your event is hereby cancelled. You will be billed for the services rendered up to this point. And please be advised, you and your family have been permanently blacklisted from this property and all of our affiliate locations." He stood up, a clear dismissal. Brittany's world had not just crumbled. It had been systematically dismantled, piece by piece, right before her eyes. The next morning, the sun rose on a very different reality. The magnificent floral arrangements were being carefully disassembled. The reception hall was silent. Tasha Rowland walked through the doors of a sleek, glass-walled office building in the city's bustling downtown district. There was no dirt on her work pants today. She was dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored power suit, her heels clicking purposefully on the polished concrete floors. Staff members nodded respectfully as she passed. "Good morning, Miss Rowland." This was the headquarters of Petal Row, her empire. She walked into her corner office, a spacious room with panoramic views of the city skyline, and waiting for her, holding a tablet and a fresh cup of coffee, was Ellie Jameson. The former junior event assistant was now dressed in smart business attire, a look of excitement and purpose on her face. "Good morning, Tasha," Ellie said, a bright smile spreading across her face. "The contracts are on your desk for final signature. All three of them confirmed this morning after seeing the news." Tasha looked at the stack of documents. 3 new high-profile clients, deals that would propel her company to an even higher echelon of success. The story of the Florist CEO had, in a strange twist of fate, become the best marketing she could have ever asked for. She turned to Ellie and placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "You saved the day, Ellie," Tasha said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You showed incredible integrity. That's a quality I value above all else." She smiled. "Welcome to the team." Your official title is executive assistant to the CEO. I think you've earned it. Ellie's eyes welled up with happy tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. In one weekend, she had gone from a temporary gig to a career, all because she chose to do the right thing. For Brittany, the fallout was swift and brutal. She tried to perform damage control, posting a vague, tearful apology on her social media accounts about wedding stress and making mistakes. But it was too little, too late. Ellie's video, leaked by an anonymous source who just happened to be Marcus, had gone viral overnight. The hashtag Florist CEO was trending worldwide. News outlets picked up the story, contrasting the image of the cruel, entitled bride with the quiet, powerful dignity of the millionaire business owner she had tried to humiliate. Her brand deals, the small-time sponsorships for teeth whitening kits and subscription boxes that she had been so proud of, vanished. Emails flooded her inbox, all with the same message: we are terminating our partnership. The wedding blog she had spent years building was taken offline by the host server, citing violations of their hate speech policy. She was a pariah. Her carefully crafted online persona was destroyed, replaced by the ugly truth she had shown the world. Meanwhile, Logan appeared in a single heartfelt television interview. He wasn't there to bash Brittany. He sat beside Tasha, his hand resting on her arm, a picture of familial solidarity. He spoke of loyalty, character, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are. He publicly apologized to his sister for his blindness and thanked her for her strength. They stood as a united front, a testament to a bond that was stronger than any lie. A week later, the chaos had subsided. The news cycle had moved on. Tasha, Logan, and their mother sat around a small table at their favorite family-run Italian restaurant. The air was filled with the smell of garlic and fresh bread, and the sound of their own easy laughter. They raised their glasses of wine, the light catching in the deep red liquid. To family, their mother said, her eyes shining with pride as she looked at her two children. Stronger than ever. Logan clinked his glass against hers and Tasha's. To Tasha, he said, his voice full of a new, profound respect, for showing me what true strength looks like. They laughed and shared stories, not of the wedding that wasn't, but of their childhood, of the future, of the things that truly mattered. The collapse of a toxic relationship had not been a tragedy. It had been a liberation. It had stripped away a painful lie and revealed the beautiful, resilient truth of their family bond. They were stronger, closer, and more honest than they had been in years. The storm had passed, and what remained was clear, bright and full of promise. Sometimes, the person you ignore is the one who owns the room. Stay humble. Stay human. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.